Well, hello, my name is Nathan Barczi with the Octet Collaborative, and today I'm here with Professor Ian Hutchinson, one of Octet's faculty advisors and professor of, tell me if I get this right, professor of nuclear physics at
Nuclear
MIT.
Science and Engineering.
Nuclear Science and Engineering at MIT. So Ian, thanks so much for being with us this afternoon. It's good to be with you.
Yeah.
Could you start off by just telling us a little bit more beyond your name and title, just a little bit more about who you are, what you do, how long you've been at MIT?
Sure. I am, as I said, professor of nuclear science and engineering. Actually, I'm really a physicist, so your confusion is not unwarranted. I'm a plasma physicist, and the reason that I'm in the Department of Nuclear Science and Engineering is that for most of my career, I have been studying how to bring the sun's energy source fusion reactions, nuclear fusion reactions, down to Earth and make it available in the form of fusion energy to meet the needs of humankind. So that's basically what I've done for the time that I've been at MIT, up until fairly recently. But at the same time, learning how to do that has necessitated us really understanding at a very deep level the physics of plasmas. Plasmas are ionized gases, the gases in which the electrons are stripped away from the nuclei and they become electrically conducting, and the electrical and magnetic interactions become the most important things about those gases. And actually, plasmas fill the universe, and the Earth is a rather unusual place from the point of view of a plasma physicist, in that there aren't all that many plasmas here, although there are some naturally occurring, and we use plasmas for many other things. But fusion has been the strongest, let's say, motivation for developing the science of plasma physics. I've been at MIT on the faculty for, well, this is my 40th year, actually, on the faculty at MIT. And I am, so therefore something of an old timer here. I actually first came to MIT in 1976, which is even longer ago, but I was at that stage a research staff member. You can probably tell from my accent that I'm originally not from the US, but in fact from the United Kingdom. I did my undergraduate studies at Cambridge University, the Cambridge, and
not the other Cambridge, the Cambridge.
Right, and I did my doctoral studies in Australia, so I'm pretty an international sort of person, as many faculty members at MIT are.
Right. Yeah. So I think the very first time I heard you speak was in the context of it was one of these Cambridge Roundtable events, and you were speaking. The general question was one that you've written a lot about, that I wanted to ask you about, in sort of the question of whether science is the only way to access real knowledge about the universe, something that I think you referred to as scientism.
Right.
I've written a couple of books about. So could you just, is it possible to give kind of the 2-minute version of why? I recall your answer to that was no. And in your books, I think we've been clear about that. Is it possible to just kind of give the 2-minute argument?
Yeah. My book from 2011, about scientism, which is called Monopolizing Knowledge, is basically addressing the fact that in modern society, Western society at any rate, there is a kind of backdrop of belief that somehow not only is scientific knowledge rather special, which I agree with, it is rather special, it's our knowledge of the natural world, but that in fact it is the only way that you get knowledge that you can really trust and really call knowledge. And so scientism, to define it very, very briefly, is the belief that, science is all the real knowledge there is. And while it's not the case that most people would get up and say that they believe that, very often they speak and talk and interact as if that's the case, and as if, if you really need to know something, want to know something, you have to use science to find it out. this became an important question to me because I'm a Christian and because particularly in the first years of this century, the anti-theists, so-called new atheists, the anti-theists of those days were basically espousing a scientific view and complaining that, well, the reason why we shouldn't believe any religions is because they're not demonstrated scientifically. And I fully agree that Christianity nor any other religion is we would expect it to be proved scientifically using the methods of natural sciences. But the same is true of almost everything in history, for example, that we aren't going to prove it from using scientific methods. And I believe that there are many other disciplines throughout our intellectual endeavor whose methods of finding out what they know are not the same as those that we use in natural sciences. And so that's basically the point. Yes, it's part of my journey through trying to understand the relationship between science and my own Christian faith that's led me to focus on that particular question, because it's such an important question in that venue.
Yeah, well, it really is, and I was impressed the first time I heard you speak about it. It was very clear and compelling, and I've appreciated your presence at MIT.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So Ian, as I've been doing these interviews with different members of the Christian community at MIT, I've been asking almost everybody the same two questions, and it's been fascinating to hear the different answers that you get. So the first would be to ask, when you look at MIT, where do you see the greatest obstacles to human flourishing on campus or at MIT?
Well, of course, a lot depends on what you mean by human flourishing. Human flourishing within the academy is probably a little different from the view of human flourishing that one might have, in the general public. Of course, we at MIT, engineers, scientists, and other academics, think that what we do is important because it helps humanity as a whole to flourish. Certainly, engineering is and the science behind it is in large measure aimed at understanding the world so that we can make things better for humans. Of course, we don't always succeed, and actually technologies, as we were discussing just this week, technologies can often be double-edged, and so whether in fact one promotes flourishing of humans by certain technologies is open to question and is open to important study. But that's part of what we do. So, the way in which we in the academy pursue these goals, whether they're goals that are, aspirational, like human flourishing, or more down-to-earth goals like can we make some money? The way we do that is by finding out things that are truthful and useful and reproducible and so forth. And so it's, in a certain sense, the search for truth that I think has been, let's say, most problematic in the academy as a whole in the last 10 or 20 years. People often ask me, well, how has MIT changed? If you've been here 40 years on the faculty, how has it changed during your time? Okay. And I often say one of the most notable ways in which it's changed has been in the development of a certain attitude towards truth and a certain ideological persuasion that there are things more important than truth, even within the academy and within MIT as a whole. And that has led us to a place where, for example, in the last couple of years, the question of do we have the freedom to say what we think is true at a place like MIT, and the question has been answered by the faculty and by students that no, we're not actually quite sure that we can do that. And one of the things that we've been working on the faculty has been adopting a statement of freedom of expression to reaffirm how important it is for us to be able to share our ideas, even if they're controversial ideas, or if they're ideas which aren't the same as everybody else's views about the truth of a given situation, or what's important, or what society should do about it. And I'm very happy that we passed a resolution, the faculty have passed a resolution to do that, to reaffirm that freedom, and done so in a way which says we don't think practiced civilly that contravenes, the whole ability to speak with respect and gentleness, sometimes kindness, etc., etc. But that that search for truth cannot be overtaken by ideological positions. So there's one of the challenges to human flourishing, which we've been tackling.
Yeah, it's a big one, and I'm glad you have. I'm also happy about that effort that's been underway. Well, on the flip side, the other question that I've been asking people is, where do you see God at work at MIT?
Well, actually, from my perspective, that's one of the areas where he's been at work. We've just been talking about it. It's certainly an area that I've been praying about for, as I said, several years, and I'm glad to see him at work there. I have, also throughout my career at MIT, been active in the Christian faith and trying to promote, particularly amongst the faculty, the ability to share one's Christian faith. People sometimes think, even particularly students actually, sometimes think that MIT must be a godless place because it's a place that emphasizes science and technology. And so given the myth that's in society as a whole, that somehow scientists can't be a Christian or shouldn't be a Christian if they were consistent with their science, which I completely disagree with, okay? But that myth gives rise to the view that a scientifically let's say, engaged place like MIT would not likely have many scientists on the faculty. I think, in fact, to the contrary, there are very substantial numbers of Christian faculty members here at MIT. But at any rate, one of the ways in which God is moving at MIT is through MIT faculty. One of the things that's very notable about the influence of Christianity at MIT is that amongst the leadership of departments and even sometimes in the higher administration, Christians are very well represented. They're overrepresented in a certain sense relative to their numbers in the faculty as a whole. Part of that, I suspect, is really just to do with what Christians regard as being their priorities and their call, their vocation. Our Lord called his followers to servant leadership.
Right.
And when you become a department head at MIT, you begin to understand what that might mean.
Yep.
When I was appointed head some years ago, I'm no longer head of nuclear science and engineering, but when the dean appointed me, he told a joke about being a department head. He says being a department head at MIT is like being the caretaker of a cemetery. You have a lot of people under you, and not one of them listens to a word you say. So one of the things you need as a faculty leader, particularly as a department head, is the ability to take pleasure and fulfillment in other people's success. And that doesn't always come naturally to anyone. But one of the calls, I think, of Jesus Christ on our lives is to follow him, by example, essentially showed forth what that sort of leadership means.
Right.
So it's not a big surprise to me that Christians are very active in as department heads and deans and so forth at MIT. And that's another way in which God is moving.
Yeah, well, that's great. I think that's a great and encouraging place to end our conversation. So, Ian, thank you so much for taking time.